Welcome to the Joe Cohen Show. Join me as I share my experience with biohacking and invite top health experts to explore the latest technology, supplements, research, and resources for optimizing your body and brain. Okay, today I wanted to talk about 10x and Gary Brecka. I could get more into Gary Brecka in a different podcast, but essentially I want to talk about the company 10x Health because a lot of people ask, "Oh, what do you think about 10x Health?" So the short answer is it's the most garbage product I've ever seen on the market in terms of genetics. And it's interesting because they have the best salespeople. Gary Breck is an amazing salesperson. Grant Cardone is the legendary salesperson, but they actually have the worst product on the market. And this can actually teach you a lesson about business. You can have the worst product and have the most revenue in the market. They are making the most money, but they have the worst product by far. And so and basically it's the blind leading the blind. These podcasters who are bringing them on, they don't know what the fuck is going on. Basically, how did they blow up? Essentially, they got Dana White on board, and Dana White's huge. He's getting bigger. He's the head of the UFC. And he basically said, "Hey, these guys helped me." He doesn't know how or what or where or when. He's not an expert in the area. He doesn't know anything about this really, but they helped him. And I think that is probably true. They did help him. And I think he went on a keto diet or a low carb diet. They did some treatments. We took some vitamins. He started exercising. You start feeling better. The sleep apnea goes away. I think they actually did help him. Now, the question is how they helped him. So one of their products is this genetic test, and people don't know. Basically, the genetic test is certainly not what helped them because the most garbage genetic test on the market. Now, when I say garbage, I'm not saying it's completely useless. They do tell you a single genetic variant that's impactful, which is the MTHFR genetic variants. Those genetic variants are useful, and it's just that it's 10x overpriced. So if you want to just do one genetic variant, it's $50 to get that done. They're charging $600. So the problem isn't that it's just that everybody should know their MTHFR result. And the thing is that pretty much every company that you do a genetic test with is going to give you that result. And let's say with self-decode, we give you that result plus 200 other million genetic variants, plus very comprehensive reports, plus tons of software. There's so many things that come attached with it. But essentially, when you're doing this 10x, you just get this shitty result that you really can't make any understanding of what's going on except for the MTHFR result. So I'll go through the test just so people understand what it is and why I think it's garbage. But basically, you have Gary Brecka. He got big because Dana White and because of Grant Cardone. They pumped him. They pumped this stuff up like crazy. He gets on a bunch of podcasts. And in the health world, nobody wants to be on bad terms with anyone else. So if somebody gets big, they just start jerking you off. And then you come on their podcast, they come on your podcast. And all of a sudden, everybody starts sucking Gary Brecka's dick. And that's the main story. So he gets on Diary of a CEO. He gets on all these podcasts. And people are like, whoa. And now they're making $10 million a month on sales of this shit genetic test. That's the worst test on the market. So that's just a overview. And now I'm going to go through the actual test so you could see what it looks like and why it's complete garbage. Okay, so what we have here is it goes through the methyl. This is literally how the test starts. Okay, so it goes through the methylation detoxification cycle. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 genetic variants in this report. Now, again, they might be updating this to 10 genetic variants, but 5 genetic variants is nothing. It's a garbage shit report. A lot of these genetic variants are not very significant. Maybe the COMT is more significant a little bit, but still the MTHFR is the main one. Mainly, you're just trying to understand if you have this MTHFR variant. These other things are like very small bonuses. You're not really going to get that much information from them, but that's fine. Some people could claim you want to make clinical decisions on some of these things. That's fine. But there's the main thing is the MTHFR genetic variant, and that's related to methylation. That's related to a whole bunch of stuff. So what they do is they give you this complex diagram that regular people are not going to understand what's going on. But they say, okay, no mutations present. Now let's go through the personalized genomic commentary. MTHFR C677T heterozygous, a gene inherited from one parent. So you got one mutation here. This is also heterozygous. You got another mutation here. Now, again, how do people make sense of what to do with this? That's a good question. Gary Brecka is basically going to tell you that you're going to cure cancer, anxiety, and a million other conditions with this one SNP, and you have to know what this is. And it is one SNP and one gene at the end of the day. So it is important, but I wouldn't say it's as important as he makes it out to be. Yeah, he's got his whole spiel about the methylate. Some people can't produce the proper form of folate and they need this supplement. And it doesn't really work like he says it does, but let's move past that for now. They give you a whole bunch of genetic variants. Again, there's very little you're going to do with this information. Now we go with recommendations. They tell you to take this methylfolate. So basically, the only thing that this thing does is they tell you if you have MTHFR genetic variants, and if you do, you should take methylfolate. That's pretty much, and they tell you some cofactors like riboflavin. You could take methylfolate and riboflavin. There's also niacin, magnesium, zinc. Okay, that's the whole report. Everything else is pretty much garbage. They tell you dietary sources. Nothing you can't look up on ChatGPT. What are the sources of folate, riboflavin? It's mainly folate and riboflavin. So just to sum it up, they'll tell you your MTHFR result. They'll tell you what, folate and riboflavin. And that's pretty much what you're going to get from this kind of report. Now, the only thing is that, so I think there's some value to that. The only problem is that $600 is 10x the price. So that's why I assume they're called 10x genetics, because you pay 10x the price. And so that's my only issue, is that they're marketing this thing as it's the best thing since sliced bread, but actually it's the worst genetic report on the market. And like I said, every company does MTHFR. That is the standard in the industry. So let's go back to here. You see this diagram. Now, even the diagram is not very sophisticated. Is looking at a single genetic variant for each of these genes, which is not going to tell you how these genes are working. You really need to look at multiple genetic variants. And yeah, and the recommendations are, it's very just, you have this variant, you take this recommendation. It's not comprehensive. It's not looking at so many other things, right? And if you compare it to something like self-decode, we're looking at 200 million genetic variants. We look at millions of genetic variants when it comes to something like mood problems, anxiety. Whereas Gary Brecka is going to have you think that just looking at one genetic variant is going to tell you everything you need to know almost about anxiety. The reason you have anxiety is because you can't produce enough of this methylfolate, which is garbage, right? It might have 1, 2, 3%, 5% of the cause of anxiety or mental health problems. We're not talking about, this is not the major issue of just curing everyone's mental health, just to see if you have MTHFR. At Self-Decode, we look at millions of variants to predict whether somebody has anxiety, and then we use very sophisticated algorithms to come up with recommendations, whereas this is extremely simplistic, very hard to understand. The recommendations are extremely simplistic, and it's interesting because if it's super simplistic, you'd also expect this to be very easy to understand. So the combination of difficult to understand plus overly simplistic is a combination of the worst product out there. Also, the least thorough with only 5 SNPs, which is an embarrassment. So that is, yeah. Now let's compare this to a methylation report that I think is way better, 100 times better. And again, this is not going to be the most user friendly, but if you're a practitioner who has experience in methylation, then it's something that you've learned about, and I think it's could be useful. So it's something that does require more experience a little bit. This is not a product. We built this product for practitioners, not for regular users, but some advanced users, biohackers can actually use the product as well. So you see, we have the 100x methylation report, and this is actually my result. We give you the whole methylation pathway, and each gene here, we're looking at many genetic variants. So each of these genes, we're looking at many genetic variants. The yellow actually means it's typical. The thing you want to look out for is orange. This is where it is negative, right? Green is, it's particularly good. We might change the coloring if yellow to be something more neutral. But essentially, we're looking at usually many genetic variants in each of these genes, and we give you the whole pathway that it's related to. So you could see in this case, my whole methylation pathway here is pretty fucked up. From this tetrahydrofolate, MTHFD1 is not working very well. And then this is a little down-regulated. You could see the arrow, by the way, if it's up or down. These are down-regulated. This one is actually up-regulated. Just a risk. That's something I think it could be like maybe pulling this methyl 510 MTHF back into here. But basically, you have this thing is, and then here it's also pretty clogged up. This is not working so well. And then when you get to here, once they finally get to 510 MTH methylfolate, it's clogged up by MTHFR again, right? And what we're seeing here is that it's very hard for me to create 5-methylfolate. Now, if you're a layperson, then I don't expect you to understand this. And by the way, you can look at this on video. I think it's going to be a little easier. But you could see that we're looking at the whole folate methylation pathway, the folate cycle, the methionine cycle, and we're looking at many genes, many variants in each gene. You could see all the different SNPs we're looking at. And you could also see the lab summary. We could see what labs are out of the optimal range. So it combines, and not kind of it does, it combines the labs with the SNPs. And then if that stuff is too complex for you, you could look at, by the way, each of these reports. So each of these genes go into its own report if you want to. But you could see blockers, enhancers. So you could actually go into the deep dive of each individual gene. Your genotype is increasing this gene, gives you the variant, increased and impaired methylation ability, and it's saying what blocks it, what are some enhancers, SAN E and glycine. I take those. Alcohol and methotrexate are not good for this. And so it goes into each of these. This is if you want to go into the details of each of these things. Again, this is more meant for biohackers and practitioners. And so this is a really cool methylation report, the best on the market by far. So it's going into each of these. And then when you scroll down, it goes into the recommendations. So as opposed to some of the other recommendations, you could see your recommendations. It's the top. We give you, let's see, 13 recommendations here. And we're telling you when you go to each recommendation, let's say folate, it's telling you all the genes that this recommendation is helping with, not just one gene. It's telling you all the genes. So as opposed to the 10x genetic report, which they're just giving you some information on one particular variant at a time, we're going through hundreds of variants. Recommendations are being made based on hundreds of variants. And then, yes, that is quite important. You could see L-methylfolate, 400 to 800 grams. And then riboflavin, you could see multiple genes that it's helping with. And the things that are helping with the most genes and pathways are going to end up on top. That's why you see here, this ends up on top. And you keep going down, you could see as you go down, things are helping less and less genes, but it's giving you the top recommendations based on many genes. So we're looking at many genes, many variants, and we give you the whole methylation pathway, which is the methionine folate cycle. And this comes with self-decode. So you get this report plus 700 other reports when you sign up to self-decode, and you get 200 million variants. And you can put in labs, you fill out lifestyle questionnaires, you get ancestry. You could really, the product is incredible. Whereas when we're looking at this 10x report, it looks like shit. It's 5 SNPs, garbage. The recommendations are garbage. There's too little SNPs, like I mentioned, too little variants. And so, yeah, that's why when people overhype products, you know, it does, I think, people buy it and they're, a lot of people are just like confused. Hey, what's the difference between self-decode and genetics? 10x genetics is shit. That's the difference, right? It's what's the difference between a toy firecracker and a rocket ship that could go to Mars. It's a huge difference. It's overpriced. My conclusion is that the 10x genetics report is overpriced, looking at too little data to make any conclusions. And overall, it's got snake oil written all over it. 67% of listeners aren't subscribed to the show, so please don't forget to show your support by hitting the subscribe button now. You'll not only be supporting the show, but also investing in yourself and your health journey. all while helping keep us ad free.